Due to the budget standoff in Congress, the federal government is getting closer to a shutdown and possibly headed for default. At issue are the size of government and where its role should be limited. In last year's advisory question sponsored by the Budget for All coalition, voters in Massachusetts called for protecting safety net programs and making cuts in other spending. And coalition members reinforced the message today with an emergency vigil in Boston outside the local headquarters of the Republican Party. Joining us from the coalition is a member of the coordinating committee, Lee Farris. Thank you very much for being with us, Lee.
Thank you for having me.
I want to have you go back up to that advisory question because you got a pretty strong yes vote. And what was the yes vote for exactly?
Well, we had four things that we were calling for. We wanted no cuts to affect Social Security and other benefit programs that benefit people. We want to increase employment for workers since unemployment figures are still very high across the country. We felt like the cuts that the Republicans say they need to make in the government to balance the budget could instead be achieved by increasing taxes on the wealthy and on the largest corporations, many of whom are avoiding taxes altogether. And I pay more taxes than some major corporations, which is kind of crazy. And then lastly, that military spending is taking a huge part of our federal spending. And if that's reduced, like by cutting certain planes that don't fly and things like that, then we could spend less on the military now that we're pulling out of Iraq and winding down in Afghanistan. And that would be another place we could save money. So those are the four planks. And even in districts that voted for Scott Brown or other Republicans, our referendum passed overwhelmingly.
Well, I know the Republicans have been working on this budget issue for a while, and what they've been working on was this sense that at some point we're headed for a catastrophe unless we do something to make this more sustainable. But now the focus is on Obamacare, and I guess what they're trying to make it look like is this isn't about things that are already there. We're talking about an expansion of government.
Well, but that expansion of government has already been voted on, and it's been in place for 4 years. I have my brother's wife, my sister-in-law, has become disabled recently, and she is praying for Obamacare to go into effect because she has had years of pre-existing conditions where she couldn't be insured, and so she's looking forward to that. That's in place now, but now because she can't work, she didn't have the income to pay for health care, and under Obamacare, she would be able to. This is a woman that's living on $13,000 a year. So there are people like her all across the country who paid taxes, who worked for decades. Now they need help, and we need to come to their aid. More specifically, though, the last time that there was a budget, a federal shutdown, government shutdown, was under the Republicans, the House Republicans back under President Clinton. The Republican head was Newt Gingrich. And that, for many of our listeners here weren't alive then. That was a long time ago. We haven't had a government shutdown because the two parts of the government can't agree with each other. All this time we've been able to figure out how to have a resolution to these issues without shutting down the government. That's what the Budget for All is calling for. We're saying pass a clean, continuing resolution of the spending that everybody agrees on, and then work separately on the things that you disagree on, and don't shut down the government, because it's going to mean that active duty soldiers don't get paid. It's going to mean that some Head Start programs get closed. Here in Massachusetts, any national parks are going to get closed, so the office that we have in downtown Boston and the Harbor Islands, that's going to get closed. The Old North Bridge in Concord is going to get closed. So it's going to affect all of us, not just people who are needy or something. So,
of course, the Republicans are saying that the Democrats, and the president included, can negotiate with them over Obamacare. I know negotiating probably means being dramatically changed, but they say, well, look, that's not an absolute no either.
Well, I'm not here to talk about Obamacare. As I said, my opinion is that it would be good for people to have it. But apart from Obamacare, they need to agree on the government that they do agree on and pass that spending. They are in effect holding hostage everybody else and everything else. Today at our vigil, we had dozens of federal workers who are going to get furloughed, and furloughed means they don't get paid. And across the country, that's hundreds of thousands of people, federal workers, that are not going to get paid. I talked to one lady who works in Social Security, and while the checks will go out, anybody that needs information, that wants to apply, or who has to appeal a decision of Social Security, that's not happening. That's all getting closed down. We had a guy speak at our vigil who is getting ready to apply for Social Security, or normally he would be, but he's not going to be able to now. We had a lady from the head of the EPA in Boston. She said, this is just going to be a holiday for polluters, that the EPA won't be able to be on the job to make sure that they are not polluting. That's not what all of us need. So do keep the government that people have agreed on, and settle your differences on what people don't agree on some other way.
Of course, the other possibility here is that rather than having everybody come to their senses, this shutdown or partial shutdown will lead to a default.
Well, that is looming down the road, and that's something that the Budget for All Coalition is deeply concerned about, is going to have bad international economic consequences if we have a government shutdown. Already the markets today were down all around the world, but a default on our debt would be far worse. The last time that we even threatened to have a default, our credit rating was lowered, which means that it costs us more money to borrow. So that's really not going to be a good idea. So what's going on with that is 2 weeks from now, we're going to hit what they call the debt ceiling, which is the amount of money that Congress has already said is okay to borrow. However, Congress has agreed already on a certain level of spending going forward. So if they don't borrow more money, we won't be able to cover the amount of spending that they've already agreed on. And again, we think in the Budget for All Coalition that Congress needs to raise the debt ceiling enough to go forward. And again, if there's differences on taxes, on military spending, on Obamacare, whatever, settle those separately.
What's also been missing from this focus on the possible crisis and on Obamacare is the context here, because we've had I think, a reduction of the deficit lately. And so I guess this whole idea about the economic catastrophe from government spending, it's actually getting a bit more remote rather than the other way around.
That's correct. The debt, the amount of debt that we have has turned the corner, and it's going down. That's partly because of the tax agreement that was passed at the beginning of this year in January on another midnight battle, and that did increase taxes on all of us because the discount in our payroll tax that we all had paid went away, and then also there were higher taxes on the very wealthy. So that has helped us turn the corner on the debt. And when there's all this turmoil in what our government is planning to spend and laying off people and so forth, that just makes the economy worse, which means that we have fewer federal taxes, and it actually ends up getting us deeper into debt. So it's very counterproductive to have either a shutdown or a default on the debt.
Of course, the other thing that's been going on is that there have been spending cuts, and
that's right.
And you know, sometimes they're on things that we don't know about, but there are things going on: housing subsidies, preschool. So there are things going on out there already, and people are already feeling it.
Right, and that's what's called the sequester. And those cuts are already happening. There are already kids that can't go to Head Start because of that had signed up last year. There are already people who had spent 5 years on a list to get into subsidized housing, and just when they got to the top of the list, they said, nope, can't take any more people because we'd have to cut back. People that are receiving unemployment all across the country, if they're getting the federal unemployment benefits, that's already been cut, very substantial amounts. So the sequester cuts in the budget are already impacting everywhere, and here in Massachusetts they've had a particular impact because we get a lot of federal grants for all our research and medical stuff and so forth. And so that has actually caused, according to the Boston Globe, our unemployment rate to go back up. We used to be a lot lower than the rest of the country. Now we're about even with them.
Briefly, I know your coalition's at odds with the Republicans in Congress, but you have to be worried about the Democrats because they're going to feel more pressure to make a deal, I guess.
I'm not seeing that they look like they're going to cave this time. So the one thing that I've heard that they might do some kind of arrangement on is a tax on medical devices. And I think that's not the greatest idea because that's then going to leave us with more debt if the income that we had planned to have is taken away, unless they find some other tax that they're willing to raise. But I doubt that that's very likely. So I am expecting the Democrats to hold fast and stick to their principles and say we need to pass a budget without any changes in laws, and we can talk about other stuff all along. All along, President Obama has said he's willing to talk about changes in Obamacare, but he's not willing to talk about ending it, he's not willing to talk about defunding it, and he's not willing to delay it further. So those are the things that Republicans have wanted, and little changes they've made clear will not satisfy them. Things to make the program run better. They're not interested in that.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having us. Check out Budget for All online.